Welcome to another edition of Working with Gen Z. I'm your host, Nikhil Raval. Friends, in season one, we did an episode on communication and the importance of communication when it deals with when it relates with Gen Z, and we spoke about how communication is important in building a relationship. And we talked about the fact that when Gen Z is very tech savvy, what about the fact that they also need to learn other modes of building communication skills, mainly face to face and other skills. And that was more of a high level kind of overview of the importance of communication. Today, we're going to double click and dive deeper into one particular aspect of communication and how Gen Z, perhaps even at this early in their age, in their career, can become good at something, which is something that we expect for senior leaders. And I'm talking about the skill and the art of storytelling. And we all know that as young children, and perhaps even in our working professionals, when we've heard a good story, it's always remained with us. And it's not important just to kind of tell a good story. It's equally important for the storyteller to make an impact and how you tell the story. And therefore, that can be a difference in terms of, a good meeting to someone getting motivated and taking action. And to help us understand all different aspects of stories, what goes into story making, and can the Gen Z at this young age develop and look into the aspects of storytelling. And to help me with that is my guest, Indraneil Chakravarti. Indraneil, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and as we've done, friends, I'm going to quickly read out for all our guests the bio for our guest. And Indraneil has kindly requested me to keep it brief, and I'm going to do so. Indraneil, or IC as he's called, is the author of national bestsellers Stories at Work, Unlock the Secret to Business Storytelling. He's also an ICF certified executive coach who has worked with senior leaders from multiple industries. Prior to starting Storyworks, IC had worked for 23 years in marketing, sales, and general management roles in Unilever, Tata, and Mahindras. His last role in Unilever in 2006 was that of a global brand director. His last corporate role was that of a chief marketing and strategy officer at Club Mahindra. He's by education a computer science engineer and an MBA, and he's based in Goa. IC, once again, thank you, and looking forward to doing this.
Same here.
All right. Okay. So let's get to it. I'm going to start, Indraneil, by a very basic question here. Why are stories becoming such a powerful medium of communication now? Has it always been that? And can you also help us the distinction between business storytelling and simple storytelling?
So stories have been there with us from time immemorial. In fact, if you think about cave paintings, and one of the most well-preserved cave painting is in a place called Leroy in southwest of France. It's a bullfight. That has been dated as 35,000 years. Yeah. And why were people painting in caves? Because the human desire to share was there, but unfortunately language was not yet born. Yeah. So human beings have been telling stories from even before language was born. And they use the medium of painting in a cave. And the fact is, because we have as a species been telling stories from such a long period of time, human beings are actually genetically wired and are born with an ability to tell stories. So, Nikhil, do you have children?
Yes, I do. 2 Gen Z boys.
Yeah. Yes. Oh. So now think of the 2 boys when they were growing up, when they first were able to string a full sentence together. Yeah. What were they able to do? Did you ever hear them make up stuff? Like you walked into a room and there was something broken and you said, hey, how did it break? Did they sometimes make things up for you? Like, so-and-so happened.
Yeah.
Spider-Man had come.
Yeah, right.
They told you a story.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you teach them storytelling that, stories should have a context, a hero, or a climax? No, you didn't.
No.
You taught them mathematics. You taught them handwriting. You taught them spelling. You didn't teach them storytelling. Why? Because humans are born to be able to tell stories,
Sure.
Right? So storytelling is not new. In fact, one of my favorite authors, Yuval Noah Harari, in his fabulous book called Sapiens, writes about the fact that human beings have become the most dominant species in the world because of storytelling. Now, what does that mean? As a human being, we are able to take all our experiences and knowledge and use stories to inform that experience and knowledge to the next generation. So the next generation doesn't start from scratch. Yeah. And because of that, they become more and more and more and more powerful, right? So the storytelling has been always there with us. I think what has happened and across the world, maybe about 15, 20 years ago in the business community, and more about maybe 7, 8, 10 years in India, is the recognition that because of two things, because of the complexity of information, yeah, and the amount of noise through which you need to get your information across, and actually a third, the lack of attention span of the listener, people have been figuring out what is a better way to get that message to be delivered. And slowly they've fallen back onto something that they already knew has great power, which is storytelling. And it's not that people don't do storytelling in business. They do it at the coffee machine. They do it at the canteen. They do it even before, in a meeting room, before the actual meeting starts. What are they doing? They're swapping stories. You know what happened with that client? Or you know what my boss said? Stories.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is, as soon as the projector is on, we become this boring bullet point people. Yeah. And we know that message was not sticking. And so I think it is those three things, which is the complexity of message, the amount of noise through which you send the message, and the lack of attention span, that made people understand they need a better way to get their message to cut through and be memorable.
Sure. Now, is there a distinction I see in your mind when we use the word business storytelling? I mean, versus normal storytelling. In other words, are there subtle differences, or is it distinctively different?
I think I don't know. I'm not going to go into whether it's subtle or distinct, but I'll tell you the difference, and people can figure out whether it's subtle. So one is, when we swap stories, when I meet you, or I'm at a bar with someone, we do those stories without any intention of passing a message. Yeah, it could be just, what, I heard a great story the other day.
Yeah.
That's it. I just heard a great story. I'm telling you the great story, right? Or what happened to me today? I'm just sharing with you, right? In business, we do it in order to drive home a point in a concrete and memorable manner. Yeah. So one is there is an objective, and the objective is landing a message in business. So that's the first distinction. Normal storytelling does not have to say, I want you to know this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just sharing something with you. The second is, we don't have the kind of sort of luxury of time which we have in normal situations. Even let's say I'm meeting you, during canteen, and I'm talking, I don't have to finish in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. In business, we need to be very, very clear and sharp. And what happens then is, we need to be very clear which parts of the story do I need to keep to drive home that message, rather than just go rambling on and on. So just to me, those two big differences. One is that it cannot be, I just told you a story for the sake of telling your story. I told you a story because I wanted to drive home a message, make a message clear to you, make it memorable. And two is, I can't take that long.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's good point. Yeah. It has to be sharp, focused, and kind of convey a very distinct point. Now, I see for some of us who worked for several years, and we've been fortunate to either see a boss or someone come deliver, and we're always in awe. Wow. And now, as you say, certainly there's an expectation that more and more senior leaders, whether it's a training program or an inauguration or an orientation or whatever, they'll come and tell a story. But the case can be made that it's just as powerful for everybody else, whether you're middle manager, and here the focus being Gen Z. So my second question is, when should one start, right? That's number one. And two, in context of Gen Z, which is the youngest of the generation, and the eldest of the Gen Z would be about 25, 26, right? How can they build a bank of stories? So number one, when should one start consciously thinking about it? And second, how do we help them build a bank of stories?
Okay. So they should start as soon as they can, as soon as they become aware. Yeah. So whoever's listening to your podcast today and they resonate with the fact, hey, stories can be powerful, they start at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because why waste a resource that you have? Because everyone is actually a storyteller. Yeah. They keep asking me this question. You're more than 3,500 very, very senior leaders have gone through my programs. I haven't taught a single person storytelling. Why? Because I don't need to. We are all storytellers. We just need to be, like you said, what's the difference between storytelling at the bar and the boardroom? Yeah. So how do you tighten that? But the fact is we have that skill. So why not use it from now? Right. So I would recommend highly that you start not just here intuitively. We all, even today, if anyone, even a Gen Z person in office, I'm sure they would tell a few stories. Yeah. They won't label it stories. They may be talking about my experience with the customer. That's a story, right? So what we are telling them is, can you do it with intention? Yeah. So that they should start immediately. Now, the next question is, where do they find these stories?
Yeah.
Now, to me, there are three big buckets of stories that you can find. And my biggest and most favorite bucket is my own stories.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So if I would ask any Gen Z or anybody in office, do you share opinions and advice during your whole office day? They'll all say, yes, we do. Right? Doesn't matter how soon junior say, you have opinions, you have pieces of advice. Now, our next question is, where do you find these pieces of advice from? Or where do your opinions come from? They're not pulled out of thin air, right? Mm-hmm. Even for a Gen Z. And the answer would be experiences, right? Either my own experience or an experience of someone else that I've heard, read, or seen. Those are the only two places you can get your opinions or advice that you give, no matter which level of the hierarchy you are. Mm-hmm. Now, if I were to translate that into my language, all our opinions and all the advice we give comes from stories we've been part of, or stories that we have heard, read, or seen. And so my sort of advice as starting point advice would be, every time you're going to give an opinion which you want people to listen to, ask yourself, why do you believe this opinion is true? What happened in your life that made you have this opinion, or what happened that reinforced this opinion? And that could be an opinion that you have because of an experience you had or an experience someone else had. That's your story. Yeah. So now the issue, bigger issue, Nikhil, is not just finding stories. Of course, that's an issue. And we're just talking about the first bucket, which is your own experiences. The issue is finding the story when you need it. Right? Now, because I'll tell you, for example, let me give you an ask you a question, and the listeners can extrapolate from here and think about this question in their head as well. Mm-hmm. Let's say I asked you, do you believe, Nikhil, that skills and competencies are not enough to guarantee success? You agree with it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I'm sure most of your listeners would agree with that. Mm-hmm. Now, if I were to ask you that instead of just giving that opinion in a meeting, let's say you're going to have a meeting just now where the opinion you'll share is skills and competencies are not good enough or enough to guarantee success. And I said, this is an Indian audience, Nikhil. Can you think of a story that all of them will resonate with, that you can use to start your speech? I'm not sure, but for most people, it will not pop like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know for a fact, Nikhil, you and everyone else listening today knows two stories, at least. Yeah. The first, do you know the story about Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kamli?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that a great story, that skills and competencies alone cannot guarantee success?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you go back to their Harris Shield days, where they still hold the record of the unbeaten 600 and whatever, during those days, even people like Kapil Dev said that technically Kamli was a better batsman.
Yeah.
That time, right? And in fact, Kamli, if I'm not mistaken, still holds the record for the highest number of centuries in the first 10 innings of a career.
Okay. Yeah.
Which means skill and competency was there, right? But it vanished. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, here's the second one, a story that I will never use, but I know you know. Do you know the story of an animal race where the faster animal went to sleep and the slower animal won?
No.
The hare and the tortoise story?
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, this if skill and competency was enough, then the hair should have won, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason I won't use that is I don't use made up stories ever because there are enough factual stories to use. So the question is, why couldn't you remember the two stories you knew? And the reason is that the way our brain searches for stories in our head, the search index, yeah, is either plot or character.
Mhm.
So when I told you, do you know the story about Vinod Kamli and Sachin Tendulkar? I give you character and you said, I know the story.
Yeah.
Or when I give you the plot of the faster animal went to sleep, I know the story. But in a business context, you'll never say, I need the story when I need the Sachin story. You'll say, I need the skill story,
Right.
right? So what everyone needs to do is to find a way. And the way I recommend in my courses is to use an app, yeah, any app that can tag your database and put your stories there, even the stories that you know well, but tag it with the business message you want to you think this will do. So that the next time you need to find a story about the business message, you go to your database and search for skill and competency. And those two stories are waiting there, right? So so one is they can tap into the first bucket, which is their experiences. Now, some people may ask, do I need to put my own experiences into the database? Of course, yes, because you know your experience as that experience. You don't know it as the business point. Yeah. Let me give you a made up example. Let's say I was a very good cricketer. Yeah. And I was a very good batsman. And when we used to do the practice in school, if I got to bat, I probably would bat half the day. Right. But that wouldn't be good for the team. So after a few overs, I would somehow either lob a catch or I would do a hit wicket and give it to people. Right. That's a great story about teamwork.
Yeah.
Right. But in my head, I don't know that as a story of teamwork. I know as a story of that I used to give up my batting. So I need to I used to give up my batting and put it into the database, but tag it as teamwork.
Mm.
So that when I'm looking for a teamwork story, I find that story, right? So that's for the first bucket. The second bucket is stories other people tell. Yeah. If once you're aware about stories, yeah, you will find them everywhere, right? And so you will hear a boss tell a story, you will hear a customer tell a story, or your colleague tell a story. If you think that's a powerful story, it needs to go back into your database. Yeah. Books, many books, actually every business book has stories. Some have more stories than the others. As a starting point, and this is not the world's biggest story bank, the Storyworks website, which is our website,
Sure.
www.storyworks.com, has two playlists. Yeah. One is called the Story Bank playlist, where we already have some 75 stories and we add a story every week. Yeah. And it's not just a video about the story, but it also says, how can you use it in business? Yeah. And we have another playlist called Leaders Speak, where I've interviewed leaders and asked them about some opinion. And then I've asked them the same question. What happened in your life that makes you have this opinion? And they've told me the story. Now, I would recommend people to go there, not because I'm saying this is the stories that you need to save. Stories trigger stories. When you hear someone's story, you remember another story of your own. So either you'll find a great story from our story bank, but you also might remember other stories by listening to some of these stories. So those are the three buckets, I would say. One, your own stories. Two, stories from books. And as a starting point, our website as a starting point.
Sure. Excellent. No, what fabulous. It's just, I really like the three buckets. One question, just quickly before it slips out, I see is that, again, in the context of Gen Z, yeah, assuming you're an individual contributor, right? So you're more or less executing. Perhaps you don't get as many. I mean, you would, but you don't have as many opportunities when you're leading a team, and you have to tell what went wrong versus how you achieved that sales target versus how the client was mad or whatever the case may be. So I look at Gen Z from their role, whether you're in a sales role or kind of an IT role, right? What in their context, what would you suggest then? Should they build the bank and then look for it as we kind of move up the ladder? Because it seems like For most of us, I think most of us who are listening will agree that maybe when they stumbled into a leadership role or some role where they had to be, put on a podium and say, you know what, you got to talk for half an hour or 45 minutes, go for it. You start scratching your head and you either read, research, or whatever. But since we're doing this episode, what's your advice? What should they do? Should they accumulate and then kind of almost have it ready when the chance comes? How would they go about it? Yeah.
I think there, I would argue with an underlying assumption I'm hearing, and I don't know if I'm hearing this right, is that I would need to use stories only when I'm asked to speak for a long while or speak to a large audience. Yeah. That's
it could end up becoming like that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that's the bit that I don't buy. I think I can use stories in a one-on-one situation as well. I may be an individual contributor. I'm sure I have opinions, right? As to why I should do something in a way or why I did something in the way I did. To me, any conversation can benefit from concreteness and memorability by using stories. Yeah. So it is not that when I need to give a speech or I need to make a presentation, those are the only times that I use storytelling, right? I can use storytelling at any conversation. So I don't think it is about that I'm an individual contributor, I'm going to collect my stories so that when I become a leader, I'll use them. It'll never happen that way, right? It'll happen because I have started understanding that instead of just giving an opinion, I will also try and share, whenever it's an important opinion, what made me have that opinion, and that would be the story.
So in your experience, I see, what have you seen? I mean, someone like you, you've spread the power of stories. So even in your innings, or if you know of colleagues, like you work with some illustrious companies, and I'm just thinking, there's always a group of people who can rattle a story as and when needed, right? What is it, the opportunity, or is it the combination of that plus having individual, or is it them practicing? Because a lot of times we may accumulate a lot of experiences, but again, if they're not coming out, do you sense that it in some sense it gets suppressed or subsided, and it doesn't bring out, right? Unless someone's like a coach like you says, you know what, there are some 4 good stories in you. Here's a chance. Go ahead. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think overall, and it's to do with communication itself. When we are kids, we are damn good communicators, all of us. Yeah, we are great storytellers. And then I think both both society and education create this fear of public speaking, according to me. I came home from almost with every class, monthly reports with something saying too talkative, which means talking is a bad thing. Yeah, don't talk. Yeah, you go to a meeting, the juniors are not supposed to talk. So you're almost told that talking is a bad thing. And then suddenly you put me in front of 5 people and say, talk. You told me all my life that talking is a bad thing. Yeah, I was very natural at it when I was a kid. I naturally told 100 stories, and then suddenly you capped it on, right? So I think the first thing is to break out of that mold, that no, stories are not a bad thing. Also, we've given stories a bad name, right? Kahani mat batao, sach batao. What does that mean?
Right.
It is not something that is acceptable in a business situation. And we need to first understand that cap has to go, because we are not making up stories. Yeah. And while Devdutt does such a great job with Ramayana and Mahabharata, I'm not interested in all that. I'm interested in your experiences, and how can you use your experiences and others' experiences, real experiences, to drive home messaging. Yeah. So first is to open up that mind and open up the 2 myths. One is my business is too serious for storytelling, or I'm too junior for storytelling. And 2 is not everyone is a storyteller. There's specially born people who are storytellers. Both are myths. Yeah. You need to break out of that first, right? Of course, is there a skill? Yes, of course there is. And the skill is not so much as to anything that is unattainable. It is about saying that if I have to use a story in business, I cannot take too long. That learning of saying, how can I in advance rehearse my stories, tighten my stories, so that people are not saying, hey, come on, yeah, come to the point.
Yeah.
The story has to be the point.
Yeah.
And so I should be able to deliver the story very in a very short period, right? So is that a skill, and can it be learned, and does it need practice? Answer to all of them is yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I have excellent. I have two related questions here. I see. One is, and I remember reading this in your book in the final chapter. I take it you're a badminton player, because I play badminton myself, and we have a really nice graph where how skills over time can decline versus deliberate practice. So in your experience, right? If you have someone that you admire from your working days or even now, who is a fabulous storyteller, right? What has been your observation? Or have they been natural at it, or perhaps someone who you know that wasn't as good at one stage in their life, but with practice has really become like really good. So that's number one. And number two, from the Gen Z perspective, again, where can they learn? Because I think you and I are talking that perhaps I would love to go and see a workshop or read a book. But for them, YouTube is my go-to medium, right? So where can they think about a quick off-the-cuff kind of exposure, if you will? The ideal would be to come to an expert like you, read a book, and attend a workshop and so on. But that may or may not happen, right? So two questions.
Okay. So in the first question, have I met quite, I won't say many, but some very powerful, naturally gifted storytellers during my days of working? I have. I never called them storytellers. Yeah, I just call them, great communicators. It's just that now that I reflect back, I say, that guy was a great communicator because he kept telling me stories. Yeah. And that includes some of the best teachers I've had.
Sure.
Yeah. I used to tell people that, I met so many people who hate chemistry, and I used to love chemistry. And now when I think back, that's because that guy didn't just tell me formulas. For each formula, he told me about the creator, the inventor, what happened. He told us stories, right? So the best teachers have been storytellers. Similarly, the two names that pop into my head immediately is R. Gopalakrishnan, who went on to then, to the Tatas, and Prakash Iyer, who was with us with the Kimberly Clark's venture, and is a consultant trainer now. Great communicators, great stage presence, great people to listen to. It's just that now when I think about it, they were all telling stories. So some people have naturally been there, right? In the last 10 years, have I met a lot of people who were not naturally that and have evolved? Yes, I have. Yeah, a lot of people who've worked with me, gone through the program, as I said, more than 3,500. And these are all senior people. The average age of sort of experience of people who've gone through our program is about 22 years of experience. Yeah, not age.
Okay.
So, but even though, and the thing is that we say, it's more difficult to learn and unlearn when you're older. Yeah. Even there are many, but for anyone who's done it, you can go back and see that they've made an effort. Sure. Yeah. Because we have naturally captured, it takes that effort. So it can be done. So if you put your heart to it and you learn it and you practice it. Your second question is, where can I learn? Yeah. Right? Now, I am not aware of any YouTube resource where there is someone, a talking head, talking about how do you do it. Yeah. I know that when I wrote the book, Stories at Work, the audience I had in mind is those who, for whatever reason, can't go through my program.
Yeah.
So the book is designed as a learning manual.
Sure.
Right. It in many chapters ends with saying try A, B, C, or do step 1, 2, 3. Right. I understand that a lot of people don't like reading, and so they can use the Audible version. Yeah. But we don't have any, at least I don't have any resource where I've converted the book into video stories. Of course, all the videos that I talked about in our playlist are housed on YouTube, but that will give you the story, not how to tell it.
Yeah.
And where to tell it. For that, the only resource I can off the cuff point you to is the book.
Got it. No, absolutely. And I'm going to come to that a little more, where you can tell where people can find out more on the book. and so on. But you make a good point. I remember I see from your teacher story, or the fact that teachers become. We had a professor who used to teach finance, and the basic concept of balance sheet. He would say, imagine there is a train going on a track. Now the train could be on a track, and that's one picture of the train. But immediately after you've taken a picture, the train could fall off on a bridge, from the bridge. And so saying that's a balance sheet. Like it may look good on 31st March, but come April 15th, the company could be in a very different state of mind. And what a great way. I think everybody in the class just learned and knew that what balance sheet meant, right? You just imagine the train at that point in time, you're taking a picture, the snapshot, but the next frame of the picture could be very different. It could be the train is going faster, or the train is come down. Good.
So that's a great metaphor. That's extremely great metaphor. So metaphors are very powerful,
right?
As well.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask my next question as simplest as you can. I see, of course, I'm going to come to your book, but in terms of as high level as you can, right? What we recommend goes into constructing of the basic stories or elements. You touched upon the sources that are your own stories, other stories, and so on. But as briefly as, or I don't know if this is possible, but you can say that there are three key elements, and think about these 2 or 3 elements, and high level what goes into them, so that people get a frame or a kind of a skeleton.
So let me first give you a few non-negotiables.
Sure.
And then a few nice to have.
Okay.
Right. So what are non-negotiables without which you can't have a story? First is you can't have a story without a time marker and a place marker. Yeah. Just to give you an understanding. Yeah. A time and a place.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't tell you a story without a time and a place. So what are the most quintessential time and place marker in English story is once upon a time in a land far, far away. Right. In real life in business, it could be 5 years ago when I was a brand manager in X. I've given you time and location, right? Now, time doesn't necessarily have to be a date. It could be, like I said, when I was in school, that's time. 5 years ago is time. 2019 is time. So it could be any time.
Right.
Location could be, in my school. It could be in Noida. Anything, some location marker.
Yeah.
So you can't have a story without a time and a location marker.
Got it.
2 is you can't have story without characters. You need some character. Yeah. So I keep hearing things like, we have a product story. A product has A feature, B feature, C feature, and next year we'll be on the cloud. That's not a story. Right? So it needs to have characters. Third, and very, very importantly, it needs to have a related sequence of events. Not just sequence of events, or not just events, but a related sequence of events. So there are companies, if you go to their website now, because everyone thinks story is a great thing, which is good for me. I mean, 10 years ago, I used to be thrown out of doors by saying, there is no place for our leaders in storytelling.
What abstract concept are you talking about?
Number of places I've knocked on doors in 2013, 14 saying, we should teach your leaders storytelling. No. We are in a serious business. Now everyone is into storytelling. So they have changed our About Us page to Our Story. Open it. We were founded in X year. In Y year, we started our first plant. In Z year, we did a German, a joint venture. In whatever year, we started a cloud business. That is not a story. Those are just events that have happened.
Okay.
So in a story, it has to be a related sequence of events, a causal sequence of events. A happened, then because of A, B happened, and because of A and B, C happened. Right?
It's leading to the next phase of a journey.
Absolutely. It has to be a related causal sequence of events, right?
Yeah.
Finally, it needs to have some element of surprise. Yeah. Story is never normal. Story is always normal twist. Yeah. Now, when I say element of surprise, doesn't have to mean, oh my God, I fell off my chair kind of surprise. It is about, oh, is that how it finished? Yeah. It should be somewhere which is not the normal. So if I told you, for example, that, I got up this morning and I opened my laptop, and in my calendar, I saw that I have to have a chat with Nikhil today. And so I came, made sure that lighting was on, and I sat down and I joined. Now, it has time, it has space, it has character, It has sequence of events, but it's not a story because, I mean, technically it is, but it's so boring. No one will listen to it, right? But if I then said, and I opened Zoom and I waited and waited and waited, Nikhil wasn't there. And then I get a call from him saying, hey, I'm waiting on Teams. Where are you? And I thought it was supposed to be on Zoom. Now that's a story.
Yeah.
Why? Because there was a twist to that story. So these are to me the non-negotiables for a story: time, place, related sequence of events, character, and a surprise. For a business story, the next non-negotiable is that your story should be able to deliver a message. Yeah. Just saying that I waited on Zoom and he was on Teams is a story, but what is the business message I'm trying to pass? Then it becomes a business story. Yeah. So those are the non-negotiables. What are the nice to have? Because what this is a story. For a good story, I should be able to tell you a few things which will allow you as an audience to visualize. Yeah. To see that happening. And again, remember, I am in a business context. I'm not going to be going on and on. I'll just say one or two things that'll make you visualize, and I'll explain that to you with an example. And finally, a great story is when you can make me feel the story. Yeah. So being able to see the story and feel the story is the, if you like, the additional nice to have. The others is the must have, right? So let's say I tell you a short real story. So, I really believe, Nikhil, that little things make a big difference. Yeah. So back during the second Iraq War in Iraq, the American generals were placed in many of the cities, and there was one American general who was placed in a city called Tikrit, and one of the big issues was riots. Yeah. And one day when the general was on the first floor balcony of his office, which overlooked the plaza, he looked down and he saw a lot of people gathering. And he remembered that every time people have gathered, there more and more people have come. There's been sloganeering, etc., some stone throwing, and finally landed up in a riot. So an idea came to his head. So he rushed back into his room, picked up the phone and called the mayor of the town and said, Mayor, if I ever ask you to remove the food carts from the plaza, will you do that? The mayor said, food carts? Why on earth? He said, can you go with me? He said, okay. The next time he saw a buildup of people in the plaza, he called the mayor and said, Mayor, remove the food carts. The mayor removed the food carts, and sure enough, buildup never happened, because those guys who came in the morning at some point in time were hungry, no food, they dispersed, right? So with that little thing, which is removing the food carts, he brought down the riots in that town by close to 30%. And that's why I believe the little things make a big difference. Yeah. Good. Now, let's break this up. My story had time, Iraq War, place, Tikrit, sequence of events. He observes this, that. But if I ask you, Nikhil, where was the American general when the idea struck him?
Right.
Yeah. You'd say he was standing in his balcony overlooking the plaza, right? Why? By using that one line, I helped you visualize that very well. Yeah. So those are, to me, those two, which is visual and feeling, are what makes it good and great. But the non-negotiables are what I said in the first, which is time, place, sequence of events, character, and a surprise.
Excellent. So, very powerful. So I see a couple of questions. One is, if you're now a manager, if I'm a manager, fortunate enough to have either, have a set of stories of my own and I use it, what could be his or her role in helping the Gen Z? How can, let's say, if I have to groom a young person, right? What support or how can I steer to build the story building skill? That's number one. And number two, just going back to the comment that you made earlier, in your experience, what tends to be more powerful, I guess, if there is a way to think about that, is that your personal stories versus, let's say, someone else's story. So, for example, my son read the book of Michael Phelps, and he tells about the amount of discipline this guy had. 6 hours for 7 days for 5 years, and it's someone else's story, but equally powerful. And he says on YouTube that this was my darkest days, but I climbed the highest mountain and so on. So two questions. One is, how can a boss help a Gen Z? And number two, what works better, more of yours versus others? You can take it in any sequence.
So I think the first is for a boss, is to get people to be aware of that power. Right? That's the first thing. Can I tell people? Because as a boss, I tell people, no, if you do this, is better for us or for you. So can I actually tell people that it's a great thing? Yeah, it is very powerful. Maybe draw examples. The boss along with his team goes for a town hall, and one leader just gives some data and whatever assertions. Another leader tells a story. That evening, I could sit with if I'm the manager, sit with the team, say, which one do you remember? And then I say, that story. See? So I point out great examples, and I give you and of course, the freedom to do that when you're in a meeting with me. The second is what Mahatma Gandhi had said: be the change you want to see in everyone else. Yeah. I cannot be telling you how stories are powerful and you should use stories if I'm not a storyteller myself. Yeah. And given that storytelling still has a bad name, which is kahani mat batao, etc. I need to be able to see my boss doing storytelling for me to have the courage to do it myself.
Yeah.
So the boss has to walk the talk and be the change. Yeah. So those are the two things I would say. First is bring the awareness and give the permission.
Yeah.
Two is look at showing them great examples in their everyday work.
Yeah.
And three is demonstrate the fact that, be the change.
Right.
As far as the second question, I don't honestly have a necessary preference that A story could be better than B story. There are sometimes I don't have as powerful a story from my life, but I have the other story, which is more powerful.
Yeah.
Then it would just be which one drives home a point better.
Got it.
I typically say that, it's easier to look at your own stories because you know all the details.
Yeah.
You will be authentic in saying it. Yeah.
Would you encourage that we build more of our own? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's either or.
Sure.
Yeah. But whenever I don't have a great story and there is a great story from somewhere else, I would use that.
Yeah.
Remember that any kind of communication, the source credibility is extremely important.
Yeah.
Right? So if I don't have a story of my own, I shouldn't use a story where that source credibility is not so high. Yeah, because it will not be memorable. So for example, let me take the example that you gave of your son. If your son were to give a speech and mention about Michael Phelps' discipline, yeah, that would have a far higher impact than if he said, I had a neighbor who studied very hard and he passed his exams. Yeah. In a sense, I mean, I could say he studied 8 hours a day, even when he was unwell. But it is not going to. Why? Because the source is Michael Phelps, right? That is it just basically in any story, the higher the stakes, the higher the impact of the story.
Right.
The stakes for an Olympic champion is higher than my neighbor. Yeah. But when it is my story, A, because we love empathizing with fellow human beings, and B, because it is my story, I'll have all the data. It's as powerful, but I would use both. I won't have a preference for one or the other.
Okay. Two final questions. I see. One is, of course, you've been doing this work for so many clients and companies. In your view, are there a company or two which stand out where maybe there is a good storytelling culture, if you will? And second, if there is one, how does one kind of keep that up? I think it's something that you mentioned in your book in the final chapter about sustaining a culture. So just curious, anyone that comes to mind where they say that, on a whole, this company puts a lot of weight on building those skills within leadership.
The first two that come to mind are Accenture and Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. Amazon more driven by Jeff Bezos. As you know, that probably everyone knows that he had long ago banned PowerPoints.
Yeah.
And he insisted on these 2-pagers stories.
Yeah.
Basically, tell me.
In a meeting, you just go with a summary, correct?
Yeah, with a summary or pre. And so that has percolated down. I have met people in Amazon who have, during the meeting, used examples, and it's something that has grown into them in many places. I don't know whether how widespread it is, but for the people I've met, I've seen that. On the other hand, I know that Accenture has sort of worked on building that skill in the organization. It was one of the first organizations in the world to have a chief storytelling officer, a guy called Terence Goiguilo. I have done, I've done more than 50 workshops for Accenture alone. So out of my 165 odd workshops in my 10 years, 50 have been for Accenture. So obviously they have recently bought a storytelling company and merged it within their organization to, bring storytelling embedded into the organization. So those are the two organizations that come to me.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, so this has been one fabulous episode. Lots and lots of great nuggets, understanding stories and the power of stories and how to draw on them. I would like you to share where can people come to learn more about stories to you. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about the book, the site, or anything else that you want to share as a resource for our listeners to tap on, whether it's online, offline. So please share.
So 3 things I would say. First is, as far as resources concerned, the www.storyworks.in, which is our website, which I mentioned earlier, has those playlists. So they've got more than 100 stories as video clips, each of them about 6-7 minutes. So first the story, then the explanation. So that's one resource. The blog has a few sort of articles on storytelling. The biggest resource to learn is the book, and it's available on Amazon. It's published by Penguin Random House. And Audible, which is again an Amazon company, has the audio version. So if they are not yet sick of my voice, they can listen to that, because it has my voice through the book. So
okay. All right. Yeah.
So those 2 would be the immediate stuff. As far as getting in touch, I always accept every connection on LinkedIn, and I respond to every message on LinkedIn. So that's another place they can find me.
Fantastic. And workshops, you conduct different kinds of workshops. Are they done on a routine calendar, or do you customize? Just because I think that there's a lot of curiosity.
Yeah.
If someone who's keen.
That unfortunately, we don't do public workshops.
Okay.
It's just that I don't have bandwidth to run them. So we do many workshops a month, but they're all for intact companies. So I run them for companies. So if there are people here, the best way to is go to a L&D team and ask them to get in touch.
So there is no open workshop.
No, we don't run open workshops. I would love to, but I don't have the bandwidth to put them together.
Got it. No worries. But hopefully the folks that you mentioned, everyone can tap on the two other good resources and get them started on their storytelling journey. So once again, I see this is great. Thank you so very much for enlightening us on the different aspects of story, the histories of stories, how it can be built into our DNA, and as you say, practice makes perfect. So I hope that every single person, why not just the Gen Z, but every listener is going to benefit from the power of stories. And as you say, they should start working on it immediately after this podcast. And that'll be my hope. That'll be our hope that if we can move even a few people to build some stories for themselves, for their companies, for their teams, I think we would have made some dent. And I thank you once again. And hopefully, you and I can meet in person at some point. You're in university. You're in Goa, so I've been there many times. Of course, on a vacation. I live in Ahmedabad, so I invite you, if you're in town, please let me know. Sure. Thank you once again, and
thank you for having me.
And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.